Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech. Last time around, the Red Raiders bottled up Mr. Mustard. But this time around, can they keep the Deuce from becoming loose? What other food-related or food digestion-related puns are there out there for the taking? We'll explore. Also on the way, does Chris Klieman even own a windbreaker? Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and we are turning the page today as we move away from the Longhorns and begin to set our sights on the Purple Wildcats of Kansas State. A challenge of a whole different variety, Chris, is now you hit the road for the first of 2 consecutive weeks. And as we will get into here as we talk about this Red Raider rush D, you will face a similarly weaponized rushing attack, but they don't do it exactly the same, whether we're talking ball carrier or approach, as what we saw from the Longhorns. So, man, wild back-to-back challenge for Tim DeRuyter and that Texas Tech rush defense that continues, I think, to gain some credibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any better backs in this league than, I think that TCU's got one that's really emerging. Oklahoma State's always going to be able to run the football. Baylor's, obviously been able to put that together. That it's more by committee. But as far as just players, I mean, Bijan Robinson and Deuce Vaughn are about as good as you're going to get. And you know where the ball's going, and it's just difficult to get it stopped. And you're right. And these two running backs are in many ways very different just because of their size. I don't think Bijan is near the receiver that Deuce Vaughn is. And I just don't know if there's many better just pure football players with what they're asked to do than Deuce Vaughn is in the Big 12 Conference. I mean, he's just
right.
And I think he's from the Austin area, Casey, which is interesting. But his biggest strength may be what many perceive as his biggest weakness, because I think his small stature is what it makes him so good. And a lot of people would go, "Oh man, I'm not recruiting that guy. He's too small, or he can't be that good because he's so small." But that's right. Exactly why he's impossible to try to tackle.
Slippery, man. The definition,
like a salamander,
of slippery. And then he's got the Jets, of course. Tech defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter spent some time here this week talking about the challenge in 2 consecutive weeks, but of course the challenge and how they differ when it comes to the way that you would try to go after defending an attack spearheaded by Bijan Robinson versus this week's ball carrier in Deuce Vaughn.
2 really premier running backs in our conference, I think really nationally, and probably couldn't be any different. In Bijan, you have a traditional, power NFL back with explosive ability, great vision, strength, cutback ability. He's the fastball pitcher. He's throwing 90 miles, 100 mile an hour at you. And now you got the knuckleballer coming in this weekend with Deuce. And he's a guy that, I mean, you see him and you see Sproles all over again. Similar stature, very dynamic, can make guys miss all over the field. For a shorter guy, he's not small. He's compact. He's put together. So he runs through and runs extremely strong. He's a handful. And so we're going to have to, just like last week, have multiple guys at the point of attack because he's going to make a bunch of guys miss.
I love the descriptor, knuckleball, Chris.
Yeah, it reminds me of growing up in the Metroplex and going to watch the Rangers and watching Charlie Huff. That was my favorite knuckleball pitcher. And it was either Charlie Huff was either like, man, he's going to have get into the 7th or 8th inning and it was going to be on, or he's going to give up 4 dingers in the first inning and he was going to be out. I mean, that's what they always say about a knuckleball. Okay. The thing about Deuce Vaughn is that he's really hard to just get a clean shot on because he's a human spin move. I mean, it's like if you're the gamer, man, he's just like hitting the B button or whatever that button is, because it's like he's always glancing, always spinning. And I think that, I talked to some of Tech's defensive players this week, and what they say is he's just hard to see because he's got such a low center of gravity and pad level, I guess is what they term it. And he's just hard to kind of find. And he's really good and patient with finding his blockers and staying behind them and being patient. And then boom, he's gone. So, but I think he's just as scary as a receiver. That's really the problem, is that he can hurt you in so many ways. I mean, they don't just hand it to him and they're going to throw it to him. And watching him versus Oklahoma, he's an elite pass pro guy. You'd think that would be a weakness, but that right there is what's going to allow him to play a ton in the NFL, because there's really nothing he can't do.
Well, two really strong pound per pound guys like Deuce and the guy we described yesterday with Miles Price, right? I mean, they're kind of similar as far as the attitude, and the stature is not going to blow up the measurables sheet, but meet them in the open space one-on-one and stick your head in there and see if you enjoy the outcome, right? Even if you outweigh them in really open space, just like you're talking about there, as a pass catcher, whatever. I thought you might go returner. I mean, you can go any variety of ways. The dude is just deadly, Chris. There are yards after the catch, yards after contact. I love watching him carry the football, except on weekends like this. It makes me nauseous when it's my team on the other side of the line of scrimmage, because the Deuce is always loose, it seems like. And I don't know if it ever left like inside the building, but I haven't seen a shirt or any kind of video presentation regarding the swarm defense. But
that's what you need.
If it's not here anymore, let's bring it back, because I think, gang tackling is the theme, right? I mean, you absolutely have got to play to the whistle. You cannot give up on even a second of any play, because Deuce Vaughn will not, right?
Yeah, and I want to say 2 years ago in the game up there was a pass on the sideline where it looked like he was going to be out of bounds, and he just squirts through there, and then off he goes. And that's kind of what ended the game on a bit of a screen pass. But you're right, you're just not winning many one-on-one matchups with him. So you better have population to the ball. I mean, swarm. I mean, that was the Monte Rager days, I think. But yeah, you better bring your teammates. Or what was it? Yeah. Arizona's defense back in college, back when Teddy Bruschi was there, they were the Desert Swarm. So we need to channel something, Yeah. So, but yeah,
why did we give the Swarm up? Because I thought it was just a given, and we played the video for fun, and then I realized in some like Mike Leach years, and in a lot of the last decade, no, that was really there to remind them. Swarm the damn ball carrier. Can we play it again?
It's because we gave that up for like the air raid sirens and offense. Yeah, basically that's what happened.
My only concern with the air raid siren was just you're telling everybody what you're about to do. You're kind of giving it up right there. So I don't know if anybody cared about that.
And Mike didn't. He didn't care. He's like, hey, here's what's happening. Stop it. Yeah.
And bring back the egg video, for crying out loud. While we're on the Jumbotron history, bring back the eggs, please. Chris, I thought this was interesting, this next thought from Tim DeRuyter, because it's right here where we are when it talks about gang tackling and so important for all 11 to be flying to the football and playing absolutely till the end of the play. Because you hear a lot about, hey, do your job. Don't worry about the other guy. Just do your job. As a matter of fact, on the way to the stadium last weekend, had a couple of ladies in the car related to some of them, about to be wed to another of them. And I'm under some heat as the driver, right? Everybody's running a little hot on game days. We're trying to get to the stadium. They're gussied up, already hot.
And this is what you wanted to say. Do your job. My
this is
job
what I
to
did
drive.
Say, Chris, because I'd already got out, refreshments brought back. I packed the cooler for them, and I'm just telling them how to sort some things out. And then I'm getting driving tips. I said, I'm on the wheel. You're on the cooler. As Tim DeRuyter would say, I actually quoted him, do your job. We're all going to be successful if you just do your job. But I don't know. It actually sounds like this week it's going to take a little bit more than that. So I don't know that I was given the best advice. It wasn't exactly Deuce Vaughn in the backseat we were trying to contain, by the way, either. So I think I was still giving pretty good advice. But Coach DeRuyter spoke on, hey, it's not just about manning your gap when you're facing an attack like this and a ball carrier like that.
Well, I think some of the general principles you've got to take, and it's getting multiple guys to the point of attack. You cannot be satisfied with saying, oh, I got my gap, and if he's in your gap, you go make the tackle. You got to do a great job of securing your gap, tearing off, and getting to the football so that we got multiple guys there. Every game he's making multiple guys miss and look kind of silly doing it, grasping at air and breaking ankles. And if you think you can be a one-gap defense, good luck, because he's going to make someone miss. Just the style is going to be a little different. He's a little bit more dynamic and electric in the hole, but it's still a tremendous challenge in trying to get one guy. You got to have more than one guy to do it.
It sounds like Coach DeRuyter's warning his guys a couple of times, Chris. Hey, this dude will embarrass you if you're not ready to go, because he's talking about making guys miss all over the field.
Coach DeRuyter, what's the game plan this weekend? Yeah, that's what I heard right there. No, you think you're worried about your gap. Man, you better. Yeah. So, he sums it up well. And so we're clear this weekend, Deuce Vaughn, he's going to have some plays. He's just too good. They're too good. They're going to scheme it up. He's too good individually. He's going to get some of his. I think like your approach versus Texas was, don't give up. And you did. You gave up a long one to Bijan Robinson. You gave up the one over the top pass to Xavier Worthy. But that's what you must eliminate. Make them work for it. If he's going to get his, make his yards per carry, not 9 per carry, but in the 4 yards per carry range. Don't give up the big, giant, long run. That's the scary part. Make him earn it and make them continue to have to snap it. But again, I've seen it the other way too, where you think you've got him, and then off he goes down the sideline, and you're chasing and grasping air. Oh yeah,
we have seen that chunk play category kind of ebb and flow this year. It hadn't been total disaster. There've been some better days than some others since going back to week 1 and some of those things we talked about there. So hopefully that's going to continue to be seen as a sign of progress. You will absolutely need it when you're talking about avoiding those chunk plays against a home run hitter like Deuce Vaughn. We will get back to the Red Raiders and back to what was another very, very aggressive approach on the money down, 4th down, and it was money for Texas Tech. We'll hear from head coach Joey McGuire, but first it's Bet Online once again this weekend for all the angles and all the action and all the angles on the action. It is the live betting source online. Makes it easy for you to keep up with your team on game day and your slip as well throughout game day and into game night. HQ for live betting, stats and scores, fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite events. So head to the website today with our friends at Bet Online, or use your mobile device to learn more about what those trends are shaping up to look like this week. And if you're in the LBK, you might as well be one of those wise guys, because we are in the desert. Join the club, man, at Bet Online, where the game starts. Those big wheels getting to rolling all across West Texas, just like Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders. The harvest is on, Chris, and our friends at Flatlands Grain are now standing by to help be your backstop this harvest season. Grain storage, market analysis, crop experience, whatever it might be, our friends at Flatlands Grain there to cover all bases. Chris, just like spring, fall camp, Joey McGuire's planting the seeds. What do you come up with? We're now in the harvest, reaping what has been sown. It's just like the farmer out there all across the 806. You need somebody you can rely on. And Flatlands Grain, Red Raiders there standing by to be just that, right?
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, man, look at those cows on your screen, man. And why aren't you watching this on YouTube if you're not? But if you are, look at them. They're hungry. Flatlandsgrain.com. Go check them out.
He said cow, not cowin, even though I'm looking a little hungry as well. Close to dinner time, I think, somewhere. It's dinner time somewhere. Flatlandsgrain.com, just like Chris said. Or give Jonathan and the gang a holler. The Tulia Rose standing by there in Hale Center, Texas. 30 quick and convenient minutes north of the LBK. Hub of the High Plains Agri Center. Some call it, as in me, for the first time, maybe right now, but it's going to spread. 806-839-2522. 806-839-2522. No job too big, too small, like we said. From grain storage, a truckload to thousands of bushels, just keeping your animals fed. They got your back, and the Red Raiders at Flatlands Grain are saying wreck 'em tech. So give them a holler at 806-839-2522. See what they can do for you this harvest season, or visit them online at flatlandsgrain.com. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Subscribe. Thanks to those who have already. Glad to have you with us once again, and with a new episode each weekday and some game day coverage as well over the weekend. Thanks for joining us for the Morning After Report on Sunday. Trying to get our rhythm established. But, Chris, obviously we know Red Raiders are hungry to talk Tech football over the weekend as well, so don't want to leave you high and dry as Chris is here, there, on the road, in and out, locker rooms, dungeons, equipment sheds, you never know. And, of course, as far as where I am, nobody needs to know. So we're cobbling it together. Thank you for being patient. But, man, appreciate those who have dove in with us on some of the weekend coverage. We're going to keep it coming at you and tune it up a little bit, but new episodes certainly each weekday. And man, just wowed by those who have dialed us up so far. Chris, been good to be with all these Red Raiders out there.
Absolutely. This has been a lot of fun. I've had a good time doing it. And so far, man, winning certainly helps. Winning is better than losing, man.
That's exactly right. And I believe at last count, we are, I think we've got goose eggs in 3 remaining states in the continental United States as far as no tune in via either YouTube or podcast downloads. So let's get it together, Vermont. No surprise there, Vermont. But I am surprised by these Western homies who are not dialing us up yet. I think I saw like Montana, and I'm sure as soon as you get that new hamster back on the wheel and the heat lamp plugged in, the internet will be good enough to tune in the show. So Montana, I know you had a rough summer. Hoping that maybe we'll get you on the map coming up here soon. And North Dakota's turning his back on Locked On Texas Tech so far. Every other state, Chris, someone, even if accidentally, like the toddler got a hold of the iPad, and dialed us up, I don't care. It's still on the list.
And we're, and don't forget, we're opening up in Wyoming next year too, which is
that right? Okay,
kind of flirts with some of that territory. That's right.
I think we've got a few Wyoming Cowboys advanced scouting Texas Tech. Maybe why we have registered a number there in Wyoming. But anywhere you are here in the United States of America or worldwide, say Chihuahua, Mexico, where a download has occurred. I just hope I'm wearing the right colors, I guess is all I can say. Thank you for being out there wherever, whenever, however, and do subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts if you haven't so far. 4th down you. Is this the new tag for the Texas Tech Red Raiders? Chris, I just want to give Red Raider fans another listen in to some sound from head coach Joey McGuire. Another week gone by and some other wild 4th down situations. Do they all translate analytically? Does some involve the gut? Is it just Coach McGuire? Is it a committee? How are these things shaping up? And thankfully, we're talking about it this time around following a successful weekend whenever you were making these decisions. Here is head coach Joey McGuire.
The last say, it's a decision by committee, but we know going into every single drive where we're at. Like literally it starts out, hey, here's the magic number. And so we know before we ever start that drive, and then it changes after every first down, and of course, once you get to the 50 and past the 50, then it gets a lot more aggressive. And all that takes into account, like how much time's left in the game, where you're at in the game, what's the score in the game. And so you're really talking through the situations as soon as Kitley's sitting there, he knows wherever the ball, he starts that drive, that he knows the first magic number, and then it goes from there.
Chris, you've said this before. If you're going to go this route, you just want to see this route stuck to, committed to. I think that's the only way you can have success possibly. But even if you don't, do it full tilt. Do you feel like you've seen that? Has there been any wavering in crunch time moments, or how have you processed their commitment to that type of approach they're describing?
How I know they haven't wavered from it is the first drives in the last two games in the second half. When you go for it on fourth down on your own end of the field, when there's a whole half left to go, that just breaks every sort of rule that you've ever known watching football. It's like, whoa, timeout. Like, what do we, let's pin them deep. Let's play. We got plenty of more possessions, you would think, but I guess the numbers suggest slightly different, especially when you're down 2 scores. So I don't think they've wavered from it at all. And again, I think people need to understand, Casey, that this has been, we've seen the same blueprint in back-to-back weeks because you've been down 2 scores in the second half. So we know how they'll operate. That is different if the game is closer or if you have a lead. At that point, Austin McNamara does come out there and you start to punt it or kick a field goal, if you will. Like your specialist would come into play quite a bit more. But no, I don't think they've wavered, and they understand there could be a weather issue that would determine it, whether it be the wind or rain or whatever it may be, and there could be a situation that there's an injury at a certain position, and we just don't. Right. This doesn't make a lot of sense. But so far, man, they've been sticking to the book, and I think you'll see them continue to do that.
I'm glad you pointed that out as far as the context or the circumstance, because Joey McGuire specifically pointed that out. And unfortunately, you've got experience down 2 scores in these situations. We've worked through that scenario, right? Let's try another one, like closing out a game, maybe with the lead or something like that. But I'm really curious to see what that looks like if you do have that variable. I certainly don't know that it's going to be this week or the next week. But if you do have that scenario where you're trying to really close something out in a different kind of way, or just some other scenario where you're not down by 2 TDs in the second half. But Chris, I do think that this all has made me kind of consider, what do I want in a Texas Tech football personality? Because you got like the Leach approach, you've got like the Tuberville approach, you've got some things in between. And I feel like as a Tech fan, a fan of a program like Tech, most situations, what do you have to lose? In most situations, you're not wanting to be stupid ever. And that's why it's not like an 80 or 90% aggressiveness rating that I want. But like a 60 or 70, maybe always, for a team that may be punching up a little bit or playing a team that's got a more talented roster, at least to a degree. And I understand these things could all change, and maybe you're not that anymore in the future. I'd love to be a super talented program under Joey McGuire, but do you get what I'm saying? I think more often than not, it is going to make sense for Tech to be like the more aggressive football team in most situations. Why not take some chances if you are on the road or you are an underdog or whatever it might be? I don't think it's just like, hey, we like to be crazy because Mike Leach was crazy because it's fun. I think it behooves a program like Tech to take some shots.
Yeah, I think the last 2 years that Joey McGuire was in Waco is a great example because, one, I think what I hear you explaining is that Tech has they've got a smaller margin for error in these games because their talent is not going to be the level that some is. It could be somewhat equal, but I think you try to you make it so that if we're more aggressive, maybe we can increase that margin for error a little bit. So if we're more aggressive and we're converting these, it puts the other team on their heels, kind of like you did Texas. You get them tired, all those things, and then all of a sudden they're not quite as talented because we've kind of leveled the playing field in some ways because of our aggressiveness. But I can tell you when Joe in Aranda's first year at Baylor, they were more of a gut feel team. He's trying to figure things out as far as analytics go. How much of this do we want to use? He kind of went with his gut. Well, that season for them, and I don't know if it would have mattered as much, but it was a disaster. But last year, they operated strictly by the book, won a Big 12 championship. And again, I'm not saying that they went strictly by the book and won a Big 12 title because of that. However, it worked. And I think that in a lot of the close games that they were in, they won them. Now, do you attribute that to just because they were good, they could execute? Probably yes. But also they took some chances and it paid off. Now, we need to make it clear at some point this is going to bite you. At some point this isn't going to work out. It's not 100% for a reason. So if you're leaning on a 62% of the time number. Well, at some point, that other 38% does come into play. So I'm just throwing those numbers out on whatever situation. But yeah, but I think that this is a way that they feel is the best way to try to win football games here based on what they've got and who they're playing against.
And I feel like that's always going to be and should be welcome by Tech fans or fans of a program, maybe more often than not, somewhat similar as far as the talent level or what the roster looks like to that of Texas Tech. So good on them for that approach being employed successfully more often than not so far this season. And would love to try out maybe a different scenario than the down by 2 touchdowns fire drill that we've had to get into a couple of times already. So we'll continue on with Texas Tech football coming up dead ahead, of course, but we're going to turn our attention even more intently, like we're going to be like closer to the camera. You're going to be looking us right in the eyeball in this final segment here on Locked On Texas Tech. We're going to talk Chris Klieman. We've got some comments from Coach Klieman we want you to hear as it relates to his Purple Wildcat offensive approach, and it sounds like there is a debate up in the air as to what they should employ on that side of the football when attacking the Texas Tech defense. We'll get into what those choices are looking like and more coming up here before we're done next. But first, I want to remind you that our friends at LinkedIn Jobs right now are providing the easiest and fastest way for you to talk to the right candidates, helping you find those candidates every week with nearly 40 million job seekers visiting LinkedIn. So head on over right now and post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, Double T for your ear hole. Locked On Texas Tech. On YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast, subscribe, please. We appreciate those who have done so already. It's your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're kicking them out that hot premiere, 7 a.m., baby. 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, the Lord's time, each weekday. So be there or be square. We're trying to grow that live number, Chris, because we've got some Red Raiders there mixing it up in the live chat. But like if a Longhorn dives in, it's just on those that are there to really, defend Red Raider Nation.
Defend the lot honor,
yeah,
LOTT honor. Okay.
Like there's no one-on-one rules. You can, just pile on, I guess.
It's a
I don't know
free-for-all.
if YouTube likes that, if that's against community guidelines or whatever. But we're trying to get the live conversation going there at YouTube. So you can do it at 7 a.m. with those live chatters, and appreciate those who have been out there so far. I see you through blurry eyes, but I see you. And appreciate those YouTube commenters in general. Keep the conversation going on the Locked On Texas Tech YouTube page. All right, they were having a conversation in Manhattan, Kansas this week about what to do about the Red Raiders, Chris. And, of course, a lot of success last time around for Chris Klieman and the Purple Wildcats whenever they were upsetting the Oklahoma Sooners. And I got to tell you, I don't know if it's something that you replicate exactly as far as the way you go about it or what type of changes that they're going to have to take into account. But it was interesting hearing Coach Klieman describe some of what was a part of them being so successful last week, and now how they are considering potentially how they could work that to their advantage this week against the Red Raiders. Here is Coach Klieman.
Sustained blocks, and that's we ID'd guys better with a lot of stunts and movements that teams have done to us. And you can ID guys, and you either sustain them or you fall off of blocks. And I thought we did a really good job of sustaining blocks and not falling off of them, and really did a good job at the point of attack. The other thing I know helped us in the run game is the amount of tempo that Colin ran and tried to go fast. We believed that they were going to wait to see what we lined up in, and I think we caught them a few times. That gave us not a free 10 yards, 12 yards, but gave us some second and shorts or got us a first down simply by going fast.
You may not be thinking speed, I guess, just as a fan generally, if you're thinking plodding, deliberate K-State, Chris, but that may be a mistake this time around.
Yeah, I think they're changing a bit. And he mentions Colin Klein, the former quarterback there, that's now the quarterback coach and kind of OC type role for Kansas State. And it's funny, you don't really hear coaches talk a lot about blocking, just the way he talked about it.
Yeah,
That's typically why Kansas State is so good, because they do those two things really, really well. They block and they tackle well, and that's what football is. I mean, we can talk about all these different other things
right.
that goes with the game, but that's what Kansas State is typically really good at. And guess what? On Saturday, you're going to see their quarterback with it's going to feel like 14 guys in front of him lined up on some formation in a short yardage, and that quarterback, probably going to be Adrian Martinez, he's going to get the ball, and catch the snap, and he's going to sit there, and it looks like the game's going to be paused. And he's going to go, okay, where do I want to go? And then he's going to gain about 5 yards and hopefully not 70. But it's the same thing, rinse and repeat. This is just what they do, and they typically do it really well. Their guys are typically really big, and they're very disciplined. They don't beat themselves, but they block really well on offense typically. And so you've got to be really good up front, and Tyree Wilson and that whole group up front are going to have to play really, really well.
I thought it was interesting to pair that thought from Coach Klieman with the thought that we heard from, I think it was Joey McGuire earlier in the week, talking about Tony Bradford as an example, but everyone in general, but
yes,
getting off of the block and kind of the antithesis of what Coach Klieman is describing there for his offensive lineman, trying to get away and make the play. So it will be really interesting to see how that matchup turns out for Tech in the trenches, where it's most important, as it is every week. And as we're talking there about some speed or otherwise, Coach Klieman also talked about kind of the internal debate, I guess, as to exactly when, where, and how to deploy that up-tempo approach this week against Tech.
In the past, I'd have said we had to probably slow it down. But for our offense to be successful, they need to be in rhythm. And the one way you get in rhythm is by going faster. And we were able to slow it down when we needed to. I think CK had a great plan of when to go fast and when to slow it down. And we have to continue to mix that up. The thing that, I hope, I haven't looked, you guys know it better than I do. I don't know what the temperature is going to be like at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. I know last week it was 90 on the field, and it was hot. Our guys were gassed. The big thing for us, whether you go fast, whether you go slow, you better convert third and fourth down. And we were 10 of 19, and they were 5 of 15. That resulted in us hanging on to the football, I think, 9 more minutes. If we'd have had 25 more plays and lost those 9 minutes, I don't know where we would have found them, especially on the defensive front. So if you're going fast and still moving the chains, I think it's great.
I thought it was really interesting how you described getting into a rhythm, because I think sometimes you associate that with like a basketball game, but maybe not often enough with an offense in a football game, Chris. And he attributed speed in helping that rhythm. Of course, you got to be moving the football also. But I thought that was really interesting, because it kind of reminded me how difficult it can be sometimes to establish or sustain a rhythm if you're having to be so deliberate, and you're sitting there waiting up the play clock and yada, yada, yada. I thought that was an interesting kind of picture he painted there.
Well, typically when you play Kansas State, that's what, I think used to really stress like Kingsbury out. And, in that when you've got this kind of fast tempo offense and you want to, because you go into a game playing Kansas State, you already knew I'm going to get 6, maybe 7, maybe 8 possessions. That's it. That's all I'm getting, just because they shorten the game. This is just kind of their MO. So this is a bit of a change in that the way that they're kind of operating here under Colin Klein. And I think that it's much like, because, whenever David Yost was here as the OC, you just went fast all the time. That was kind of what you did. Zach Kitley is very much, sounds like kind of Colin Klein, that there's similarities. If we get in a rhythm, let's run up there and let's keep it going. But you may see some slower times too, where they're not in so much of a hurry. But this is a change from Kansas State's kind of DNA that we've seen in the past. And The problem is that it worked, and it worked against Oklahoma.
Right.
I think so. That's what kind of scares you, because they caught. I mean, Brent Venables. I mean, if you go listen to him after the game, he was just, we mentioned that in an earlier show this week. It was just like, well, we didn't do this right, this right, this right. I mean, it was like the list was like 15 things long, and it was just like he got embarrassed. I mean, it's what it sounded like. And so
exasperated came to mind.
Yes.
The word exasperated.
I mean, basically called himself a terrible coach, and we didn't do a good job this week. They just did this to us. We were not prepared for it. I mean, on and on. But so they're starting to tempo a little bit now, which I think is interesting. So on the flip side is, it doesn't stress you out in that you don't have to go in going, I got to get this all back, or we've got to force the issue because we maybe don't have that many possessions left. Now, analytics and all those things are going to factor into it too. But anyway, but Tech is used to playing against this in practice. Their defense is, DeRuyter's group is, so it won't be anything they haven't seen, but just be prepared for it. But I think it's a change from Kansas State's DNA.
The bad thing about it for me as a Tech fan is it sounds like Chris Klieman is going to deploy it in an intelligent way. I think Chris Klieman is an intelligent coach. I've always thought the up-tempo offenses were the most just overwrought, overrated aspects of recent offensive football, I guess. Because if you're just doing it to do it, Chris, I'd never understood why, especially with some teams, like especially if your personnel's in a certain situation, like, I don't know, David Yost's was so often. Like, you think we can overcome the up-tempo ourselves? Like, how often were you actually exercising an advantage over a defense? Like, I really wanted to graph that down, and I never did because, like Big Brother was on, or a new season of Survivor or something, I'm sure. But I'm wondering, like, okay, in a game, this was under Cliff Kingsbury, I mostly thought this. How often, and this is Neil Brown to a degree too, how often is your team actually exercising an advantage? How often did you screw something up? Maybe because you were trying to go fast.
You're going too fast, yeah.
So I'm just so exhausted by the talk of fast. I know there's a time and a place for it, and I think the offensive coordinators who know that, or the head coaches who know that and can actually put it into practice on game day, are the ones who are really going to do it successfully. It's a lot easier to talk about it than do it, obviously. So we'll see what happens for K-State. But good grief, I don't know what you think about Chris Klieman, but I respect the guy as a football coach. He's obviously got skins on the wall on another level, albeit, but he ain't Ron Prince. And I've been wondering, are you going to have to trot Bill Snyder back around again like you did the first time when Ron Prince couldn't get it done? And I feel like Klieman fits so much that Snyder-ish K-State kind of mold that it kind of frightens me that they're just going to sustain some of what Snyder brought back in his second tenure. What a wizard.
Yeah, and they, the only thing I'll say before we wrap up about Klieman is that, there was it was about a year ago, kind of hot seat talk. I mean, they kind of, I think he's got a new contract. I think that they have an identity up there. I think that it's just a younger version of Bill Snyder. I don't know if he is Bill Snyder, but they're extremely disciplined, and it's a team you have to go beat. They're just not going to, if you catch them on the rare day where they make some mistakes, you better be good enough to take advantage of it, because it just doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the other thing, too. The one aspect that we probably ought to spend some time on one of these shows later on in the week is special teams.
Always.
That's what they are so good at, and they almost always win that aspect of these games. And they have Malik Knowles, who's, I feel like he's been there for 20 years. He's a stud returner, but they're gonna affect the game some way, in a positive way, whether it's a block or a long, return that flips the field. But that's the aspect of the game that scares you, because they really spend a lot of time on it.
And unfortunately, it's not just like a flip the field. A lot of times you're like, hey, great job busting the wedge. It's 7. Like, their return game is insane. And I don't know how many consecutive they've got against Texas Tech, but I thought they had a pretty good streak going for a while, if not still going. And it ain't just Texas Tech, obviously, that suffers that fate, man. I don't know how they do it, but K-State is like maybe number one on the list of football programs I'm most envious of, within a realistic type of context as to what a roster should look like in Lubbock versus what a roster has looked like in Manhattan and what they've been able to do with it. Bill Snyder, really, I mean, a wizard as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I sleep in a windbreaker, just because I think that maybe is where his powers came from. But I haven't come up with a good idea yet, Chris, but maybe they found something with Klieman. Hell, I tried to put him on the hot seat last week, remember? I know how fickle it is. You were asking me about those Bet Online coach hot seat odds, and we had Neil Brown, like, who's the other? Klieman? You said, no, that's got an extension.
Yeah,
because it wasn't too long ago that he was they were thinking, well, I don't know, because he got off to a pretty good start, little lull, but
yeah, he's back at it now.
Yeah, and he lost to Tulane 2 weeks ago. I don't even know what to make of all this. I guess we'll find out Saturday.
That's right.
All right, find out more on this matchup and beyond across the Big 12 Conference with Locked On Big 12. Make it your second listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. And again, remember to subscribe on YouTube if you haven't, or anywhere you get your podcast. We're back at it coming up tomorrow, and want to hit on something in tomorrow's conversation that Chris mentioned there for K-State. They don't beat themselves. You got to come and make it happen if you're going to do it as the opposition. And I want to get to something that actually has looked like maybe Texas Tech in one area emulating that. Some light penalty numbers so far this season. Joey McGuire is harping on it. We know, is Tech making any progress in that cleanliness column? We'll get to some of that coming up on the next episode of Locked On Texas Tech. Until then, Chris, enjoyed it as always, man. We'll catch you on the other side.
Absolutely, man. Keep hope alive, people.
It's our only option. And as for now, even though the Associated Press doesn't want us to, we still feel like we're heading towards a ranking. Just need another win. Just need another win, Chris. And hey, you got what, your fourth of 5 consecutive against top 25 opponents. So you're knocking on the door, baby.
Yeah, the schedule is brutal on the paper, man. On the paper.
Yeah, and what does the Associated Press know anyway? They were leasing office space from Al Jazeera, I think, at one point in time. I mean, they're buddies with those. That's a different show. Anyway, thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network.